Cynthia Bricks, and I'm a co-founder of Gender Equity and Reconciliation International.
And I'm William Keepan, co-founder of GERI, and it's a great privilege to welcome you to this great moment. It's also a great privilege to welcome our 17 co-authors of the book. So people have often asked, why do you have so many authors and co-authors on this book? And the reason is, as Thich Nhat Hanh said so beautifully, the next Buddha may not come in the form of an individual, but rather a community of loving kindness and practicing mindful awareness and wisdom together. And that's really what this GERI community is. And we do come from, 6 continents across the globe. And so the co-authors on this book represent that population of activists and leaders, and every one of them has made an important contribution to this book, as you'll hear. So I want to introduce the MC. You can let M mean whatever it means to you. Yes. Master and Mistress of Ceremonies combined, because this man lives the union of Jamal and Jalal as a Kamal being.
But those are compliments, yes.
That was all compliments, yes. And it was also having to do with the esoteric union of masculine and feminine, yes, which this beautiful man embodies so exquisitely, Jamal Rahman. And he's a longtime good friend and one of the great leaders of interfaith movement, as well as author of many beautiful books on Sufism. Fragrance of the Beloved is the character and title, or close to that, of his books and also of his character. So Jamal, without further ado, a great privilege to welcome you as the MC for this book launch.
Thank you so much, Will, and Cynthia, it's such a joy to be in your presence. We are wonderful friends. Being in the presence is like, what in Islamic mystics say, you're coming out of the circle of time and entering the circle of love. And now I'm going to invite my dear beloved friends, Cynthia and Will, to say a few words.
I was thinking about what to say about this book, but it's really about the celebration of 30 years. And I joined this work 21 years ago. Many of you know my mother introduced me to the work. So it's in the family lineage of breaking the cycles of oppression and patriarchy that are still in the process of breaking, even in my family line. So I give gratitude. My mom died 11 years ago, and she's right here with us, as my grandmothers are and my grandfathers. And so I never dreamed of this career or writing this book. I never thought about that as a little girl. What I thought about is from my mentor, my teacher of the whole freedom movement of the United States, and in particular the women and men, and of course the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King growing up in the 60s, and just hearing those women and men and King speak about the unity and all of us being together. And a few years ago, not too long ago, I sat in South Africa and I looked around. As a little girl, I had a prayer. I didn't call it a prayer, but I had a wish in my heart, and a prayer in a sense that the more people I got to know that weren't like me, the more closer I would become to God. And I looked around that workshop in South Africa and I thought, my gosh, I prayed this into being as a little girl and I didn't even realize it, right? And it's manifest in that realm. So I give thanks to the divine. I give thanks to God for bringing me here and to be a humble servant. And may I continue to serve. So this book is a charge for me to continue to serve and continue to give. The last thing I'll say is 21 years ago, 20 years ago maybe. No, maybe it was more than that. I don't know, 15 years ago. Whenever it was, Will and I came together as a couple. And there's a whole love story there, which we'll share later. But in that last training module, when I knew that we were going to be a couple for sure, I said at that training module in the closing circle, you have to marry this work. Everyone went, and Will in particular, Not really. I think he was right there with me for sure. But that's what I've done. And it's become the spiritual path. And I give thanks that we are a couple doing this work together and a whole community of beloved friends and companions along the spiritual path. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, that is a hard act to follow. I'll just say a couple of things. As most of you know, my previous profession was really energy policy analysis for abating global warming. And I became pretty strongly working with the nuclear industry, promoting actually alternatives to the nuclear industry of sustainable energy solutions. And so when I shifted to this work, I was leaving all that behind. And my spiritual teacher said to me, she said, "You're still working with nuclear energy. It's just that before you were working with the outer nuclear energy, and now you're working with the inner nuclear energy." And that's very profound, and we'll be talking about the power of what we're working with here throughout and later in the conference as well. In this moment, what I want to say is people often look at this project and say, how did you do it? How did you do this thing in so many places? And to quote Eugene Callender, who was a beautiful preacher from Harlem, who did all these projects, and they asked him, how do you accomplish so much? And he said, oh, I don't do anything. I just stand still, and God pushes me around. And that's really true here. We have been pushed around by Spirit, and because we are holding that we are not the authors of this book, but we are the instruments for this work, and allowing it to come from Spirit through ourselves and through those that Spirit gathers. That's why it's such a wonderful and fantastic community. It's not something we did. It's something we participated in. We played a role. But so did all of these wonderful co-authors. And there are many other leaders, GERI leaders, in this work. And so this idea that Thich Nhat Hanh spoke of is really true. This is a community effort. And I want to just acknowledge that same spiritual teacher who basically drilled into me. Sometimes I think she was sent to me because God figured out after I was doing this work for 5 years, oh my God, this guy's serious. We got to fix him up before he makes a hell of a mess. And so I was given a profound blessing of a spiritual teacher in my life who, and that's another whole story, but she worked with me very intensely for 3 years. And it was a lot of very intense purification work. And one of the things she drilled into me, this work is not your work. Because everybody's telling me, oh, you're the founder of this. Oh, you're creating this. You. And I said, yeah, I am doing this. No. And if you hold it that way, you will ruin it. And she really flattened me inwardly around that. And what a profound gift. Because there was a whole transformation of recognizing the magnitude of what was being taken on here, and that there's no way, it didn't matter how brilliant I was, no single human being could possibly do this. The only way that one could do something like this is to not be the doer, as all the great scriptures of the world teach. We are not the doers. We are the instruments for the doer with the capital D. And regardless of what spiritual orientation we hold, there is this higher wisdom, power, and the supreme that works through us. And what you're seeing here today is the fruit of that work around one of the deepest wounds in the human family. And I just can't tell you what a privilege it is to work with these people. One of the greatest benefits of this work is the beauty and the caliber and the integrity and the devotion and the commitment of the people that it draws, that we then get to work with and love and work together. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much. Wow. And I want to caution all these co-authors in person and online that by association, you also will be divinely pushed around. So my friends, on the next item we have each co-author being asked to speak about introducing yourself, your relationship with GERI work, and being a co-author of the book. And Garrett, we'll start with you. Maybe you'll continue this way.
So, my name is Garrett Evans. I'm an International Program Officer with GERI, and it has, for the last 5 years, been my life. And it's just such a profound privilege to sit here amongst this group of colleagues and co-authors and to know the dozens and dozens and dozens, hundreds of other people who contributed to the making of this book. So,
beautiful.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Hello, I'm Myra Kynes, and I am the GERI BIPOC and Intersectional Lead. And I have been with GERI since 2018. My involvement is similar to what Cynthia mentioned about a prayer or a wish when she was a child. And so I'm here because I asked God to allow me to love others as He's loved me.
Thank you.
My name is Jorge Rico, trainer and facilitator. And as I sit here on this stage, I know that I have realized my dream as a 15-year-old boy of being a champion for human rights. Sitting here as an author and a member of this beautiful family, I have realized my dream. Thank you.
My name is Silvia Araya. I'm originally from Costa Rica. I'm a facilitator and a trainer, and I'm honored to be part of this community and also the Latin American team that started 2 years ago. And like some of you, I've never thought I would be here. So, thank you.
My name is Mark Green. I'm a writer. I've been exploring masculinity issues for over a decade. I came out of silence and into my voice through an organization called the Mankind Project. But then I came into GERI work because the Mankind Project said we needed to ally with this organization. And what I discovered is that my voice, it was important to find that, but what GERI gave me is an understanding of what happens. And the first time any of us ever have done this in our lives, we know the sense of it, but to hear my voice in harmony with others, that sound was a startling shock to me, because I understood in that moment that my voice with different voices combined was the most beautiful thing I'd ever heard.
My name is Karambu Ringera. I am from Kenya, and I have been with Gender Equity and Reconciliation since around 2006, when I was invited to go to South Africa and experienced this amazing tool that then I decided has to come to Kenya. So I am the coordinator of GERI in Eastern Africa. And beyond that, I came to GERI because I found a tool that helped me answer a question that I couldn't answer for my grandmother.
Thank you.
So, good day. I am Tristan Johannes. I am the project lead for the GERI LGBTQ+ program. And I started also my journey in 2016, did my first workshop, and we have an expression in South Africa, snot en trane. So where you go through a process and you are deep immersed in it, and you start to wipe the tears and you start to wipe the nose. That is how I experienced the first workshop. And I knew at that moment I am called to do this work. So it's been quite a privilege to be part of this community and to write the second Bible. Thank you.
I'm Julian Devereaux. I'm from Texas, and probably one of the least likely people to show up here is a white cisgendered male, and from Texas, yeah. I'm a senior trainer for the GERI work, and I got involved in the GERI work in the last century sometime. And it was, I tell you what drew me to it, and what I'm really thankful for today is the gift of having two adult daughters that were 14 and 12 when I started with GERI, who now I enjoy their love and respect. And there's no greater gift that I could have received from this work than that. Most of my contributions to GERI were late at night over tea and chocolate in long staff meetings and sometimes arguments. But I feel like this book is part of me, I'm part of it, and it's a great gift.
Hi everyone, I'm Michelle Breen. I'm here with my husband Tim, who's at the back there. And we live on the North Shore of Boston, close to our two daughters, their husbands, and our first grandchild. And I'm delighted to be here with all of you. My background's in leadership development and working a lot on organizational health and bringing women and men to work together in leadership. And so when I first came across GERI about 4 or 5 years ago, I was just blown away as a Christian just to see the invitation to the presence of the Spirit and to see the Spirit, I would say, drawing us in to open our hearts and minds, and just how that set in motion the transforming of gender relations, which is something that I've tried to introduce into churches and Christian communities. And we'll continue to do that, very committed to that, and delighted to be part of this family. Thank you.
Well, good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, good evening, good night. My name's William Diplock, and I'm a trainer with GERI and a coordinator alongside my beautiful wife, Esther, with the GERI work in Australia. It's a privilege to be a co-author of this book, especially having been able to express how this work has changed my practice as a psychotherapist and seeing people transformed by this unique and beautiful work. I'll pass it on to Esther.
G'day, everyone, from Australia, Esther. And yes, William and I are senior trainers, and we coordinate the work here in Australia and have a beautiful team that is growing up here. We've been involved in the work since 2013. Being part of the GERI community for me has really been kind of like about coming home, and I feel like I've been coming home to myself, but also in this beloved community, which kind of opens my heart. For me, the power of this book is in the stories of the individuals who have been witnessed in this work and changed in this transformative process. And I believe as we individuals change, so the world changes.
Beautiful.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, Harin.
I'm Harin Zhang from South Korea. I am a GERI coordinator in South Korea. I've been together for 4 years. Thanks to GERI, I was able to focus on the power of love instead of anger. I participated in the facilitator course last year with my 3 friends. It's a great honor to be part of this work and this book. Thank you.
Thank you, Harin. Thank you. Can you name somebody else, Harin? Anybody you see there?
Yeah. Lucy, please.
Who was that?
Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me. I'm Lucille Meyer from South Africa. I'm a senior GERI trainer and joined GERI, I think, in 2014, thinking that I was bringing GERI to young people, only to discover that it drew me into dealing with my own wounding while being beautifully held in community. So it's a great privilege to have walked this journey with the souls who are present here. Thank you very much. And I hand over to my dear friend, Laurie Gaum.
Hi, I'm Laurie Gaum from Cape Town, South Africa. I'm a Dutch Reformed minister of religion originally, and I've stepped into the GERI training in 2010, directly the facilitator training, the first one in South Africa, and I'm a trainer myself nowadays. I write about how GERI supported me grappling with being an out queer minister in a church originally responsible for biblically legitimizing apartheid. So it's an honor to be in this community of writers and to launch this exciting book. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Desiree English from Cape Town in South Africa, and I support the GERI work as a facilitator and a senior trainer, and in Africa as the director of training. It has been such a gift and joy for me to be in beloved community in this GERI work since 2014, when at my first workshop, I felt the calling, I felt the drawing into this work, and I knew I had found another part of myself. I was coming home to more of myself. And being a co-author of the new GERI book is a privilege that has served me deeply, unexpectedly deeply, for which I am grateful. Thank you.
Okay, my dear friends, I congratulate all of you in person and online for having survived the first round. But let's make it easy. Let's have just a few moments of silence. Just close your eyes and just for a few seconds, be silent, because I really want to convey to you Uncle Rumi's insights about silence. Rumi says, silence is not the absence of sound. Silence is the absence of the little self. He goes on. He says, silence is the language of God. Everything else is a poor translation. So just for a few seconds, I'm telling myself, Brother Jamal, be silent now. Thank you. And now there are 3 groups of questions, and for each question, it's restricted to a certain number of people. So the first question, something to reflect on, to meditate on. Share an important or powerful experience of the process of writing your personal story and or your contribution for the book.
Thank you for the opportunity to share this space with all of you, amazing sisters and brothers. And picking it from that place in the introduction where I mentioned my grandmother, my community is very patriarchal, and I was a lost girl in that ocean of patriarchy. And I remember my grandmother walking out of her marriage and causing a community kind of freeze, because no woman ever did that. And carrying that because she's my namesake. And so in writing the Kenyan chapter that I contributed to, I knew I wasn't just writing for myself because of what this work has done for me, or the children that I raised. I was also writing for my grandmother and all the women in my ancestry that never had the opportunity to free their voice the way I feel the gender equity and reconciliation process has helped me free my voice. And so writing and being part of this process in the stories about myself that I shared, there's one thing that has been underlined for me, is that in living the work of GERI, I am not just working out of the box. I have invited throwing away that box. And in the next 30 years, I sit here knowing profoundly the seed that I've been part of in seeding that new space that I hope is not another box that I'm creating, for which all people may thrive.
Thank you so much, Karambu. Let's have just a few moments of silence and really honor the grace and the courage you just expressed. Desiree English.
So my immersion in the GERI work has been an important and an intricate part of my journey home to myself. And so when Will and Cynthia invited me to be a contributing author to the book, I said a resounding yes, and I was deeply moved and felt the privilege and the gift of this opportunity. And I had no idea what was to follow. Sitting down to start writing, I remember staring at the blank screen of my laptop when it hit me. Other people are going to read what you are going to write. And they're going to hear you, and then no words came, and they stayed away for a while. And I knew that when I shared with others that I am part of this writing community, those close to me, they're going to want to hear, so which parts did you write? And they would want to go and read those. And I remembered that I have not shared many of my gender wounding experiences with people outside of these beautiful GERI circles that I have been in. And the gift of the GERI methodology, we know, create the safety and the containment. And not once in any of those circles had I any concern about how my story and sharing was being held. And as I was reflecting on this reaction, I started piecing together a pattern of how I would protect myself as a young girl, as a young woman, and recognizing even into adulthood that I would make myself invisible. I would negotiate my own no, and I would allow others to negotiate my no from me when it threatened up, and I would not draw attention to myself. I would do anything and everything to keep that away. And I silenced myself in many ways, and I stayed in that comfort and the safety that I thought it brought me and that I needed. And here I was facing the responsibility of my enthusiastic yes and the writing task. And I remember again sitting at the laptop and staring at the blank screen, and I got up and I did a gender river of life exercise on a big flip chart paper and just let it all come out. And as I stood back from the page reviewing what has come up, I took a deep breath and I started reciting my mantra, and slowly a deep calm settled over me. And I sat back in my chair and I felt my entire being enveloped in a light heat and a lightness within. And I knew that moment that was divine grace taking my hand and telling me, it is time. Speak up. Tell your story. And so the invitation to make a contribution to this book began as a writing task, but it became another piece of my inner work that was calling for completion, that was calling for healing. And I was, and I am, ready to be seen and heard fully for the whole and blessed human being that I am and the contribution that I am making in this world. So may my words, may all our words find soft landing and ease for all those who are going to connect with this book and who are going to read it in part or in full. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Desiree. It sounds like you made so much effort to connect with your divine spark. I try to do that all the time through self-talk. I talk to myself, Brother Jamal, please, come on, this blank laptop, do something about it. But in your case, it really worked. Congratulations. Jorge.
So I alluded to this in my intro. I am from Bolivia, South America, and I immigrated to the States as a young boy. And as with many immigrants to this great yet complex country of the United States, we had some harrowing experiences as an immigrant family. And throughout those early years of my childhood, I often wondered why are we being treated this way? And it was when I was a young teenage boy that I discovered the life and works of Martin Luther King Jr. And I was inspired. I thought, oh, this is my path. This is what I long to do. And that then started my journey to work in some capacity. I started thinking, I'll be a human rights lawyer, and went and pursued my undergraduate degree in university, and ended up taking this kind of windy road, and eventually worked my way into the human resource world in corporate environments. And my intro into that field was a commitment to learn and facilitate diversity in the workplace and celebrate it, long before equity and inclusion was part of the discussion in the early 90s. And as I said in my intro, I sit here today knowing fully that I am a true champion of human rights. And being part of this GERI family is the most profound and humbling honor that I can have. And to be asked to be an author to this beautiful book just as my cherry on top for me. And I know that this is my mission now in life. And by following the fearless leadership of Sylvia in Latin America and our Spanish language efforts to expand this GERI work, I am further humbled because I can now introduce this in my mother tongue in my beloved Latin America. And I'm blessed and pleased to be on this stage with all these beautiful souls. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jorge. Thank you so much. You know, I'm from a country called Bangladesh. There's a Bengali poet named Tagore. I don't know if you've heard of him. He was the first Asian to win the Nobel Peace Prize in literature. And he has this wonderful poem. He says, I spend my days and nights stringing and unstringing my instruments. I spend my days and night stringing and unstringing my instrument, but the song I came here to sing remains unsung. I am so grateful that you, in your humble, heartfelt way, you have found your song. Alhamdulillah. Laurie Gom.
So I've gotten to share my story often over the last few years and so on in GERI spaces and otherwise. Of course, it's always a reflective experience. That's why I think journaling is also a spiritual discipline, really, because it gives space for you, it gives silence, it gives time to chew on your life and to see it all together, to try to get a bird's eye view, and therefore making the connections between things I've always found very helpful, so that one get a better grasp on your life. And especially in the writing, because in storytelling, in telling, it is different from writing it, of course. There's a little bit more distance, maybe, in a sense, but there's also more space to chew on words and to get it exactly right, or to attempt to do so. And I think I've really gotten a better take on how it all sits together for me, looking over my life, but also seeing the intersections with different parts of injustice, of othering, others being othered, but also then being othered myself. And I think that has been my journey, if I look back at it, but also especially in this writing journey, it has helped me to get that better understanding. Originally, I titled the piece in the book On Awakenings and Homecomings, because it starts off basically with me studying theology and coming to awareness really in the early 90s in South Africa, which was such transformative times and really things opening up to democracy in South Africa for the first time. And coming from a white Afrikaner perspective, I felt obviously very much implicated about what happened in the past, but then grappling also with race relations at that time, the awakening, a country awakening to democracy, to so many things on so many levels, to freedom really, but then also stepping into things coming closer home to me and to the women in my class studying theology, strong theologians themselves, who were disenfranchised really and not accommodated and appreciated for what they bring to the party as future women ministers. But then also coming even closer to my own body and to my own sexuality, and having to own up to who I am and how I fit in there, and how injustice is also being done to my body. So it's all around homecoming, I think, but also this stretch of awakenings, maybe coming closer home and coming closer to my own skin. What a powerful experience, and how wonderful to share it with you as co-authors, but also in the GERI community and beyond. Thanks, Jamal.
Thank you so much, Laurie. Thank you. You know, I've heard you speak before at Interfaith Community Sanctuary. I look forward to reading your book. But whenever you have spoken, I've always thought of this wonderful insight by Rumi, who says, oh God, you've created this I, you, we, they, to play the game of adoration with yourself. And I just want to say one quotation that's coming to me right now from the Islamic spiritual tradition. That's, I think this Rumi who said, music is the sound of the spheres. Music is the sound of the spheres, and we have been part of this harmony before. And this beautiful music and sound keeps our remembering fresh. Please make us remember, Kristen. Thank you, Kristen. The book includes hundreds of pages of stories, like being in a truth forum across 6 continents, as well as hundreds of pages of a grand global honoring ceremony. What touched you? What moved you? What stories in the book were particularly important or difficult to read? This is besides your own, right? This is besides your own. What inspired you? You know, I just want to say, I love this verse, you know. Find those stories that splash in your heart. That's Rumi again. And then there's a Christian mystic who says, you know, this universe is made out of stories, not atoms. So stories are very beautiful, powerful. Okay, so first one is, and please remember, 2 minutes if you can. If not, this time I'll remind you. Tristan Johannes.
Thank you for that, Jamal. Yeah, I think when tasked and assigned with the question, I had to kind of look through the book and see what comes up for me. And I just briefly wanna share in chapter 5 as well, titled "Speaking Truth to Unspoken Truths," by Archbishop Desmond Tutu, where he says in his subtext, "True reconciliation exposes the awfulness, the abuse, the hurt, the truth. It could even sometimes make things worse. It is a risky undertaking, but in the end, it is worthwhile. Because in the end, only an honest confrontation with reality can bring real healing. Superficial reconciliation can bring only superficial healing." And I was quite touched by that words in the book. And what I've realized since 2017, because I've had the privilege of facilitating a lot of these GERI workshops in person and online, is that with participants, although there's many facets in the GERI work, they always mention the truth mandala, the forum, and the honoring ceremonies as key moments for them in the workshop. And what that made me realize, and in particular with these wordings from the Arch, is the challenge is we are not challenged by revisiting the wound. We are challenged by re-entering the wound. And so that was quite profound for me to read some of the stories in the book as well. And although we speak a lot about gender circles and we're acknowledging the LGBT community as well, what has been profound in this book is about reading the men's and the women's circles and what the Truth Forum means to them. And so I was quite deeply touched by people's stories of anger and hatred, but also this coming togetherness in community, which I quite loved about that. And going into a place of depth in your stories of pain, we come out of that in celebration and honoring. And one of the precious things that I've liked about the honoring is that we often use this word consecrating the feminine and the masculine. And often the feminine and the masculine has been deeply wounded by historical trauma. And so a way of honoring and bringing together others is really about dismantling what those trauma has informed and enforced on the masculine and the feminine, and in bringing them into the light and into the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Tristan. Thank you. Sylvia.
Thank you. As Tristan said, there are many, many stories in the history of GERI and in the book. And as I was reading and sometimes remembering some of these stories, because I was there for some, there were two in particular that touched my heart and moved me. And the first one is from a little boy in India who was born into poverty and one of the lowest or the lowest caste in his society. And growing up with an alcoholic father who eventually abandoned them, and a mother who had to raise 3 children, basically just saying, I don't know, how to manage to feed them. And this little boy went through so much and ended up becoming a man and coming into this work and himself transforming lives and touching people's lives with his story, with his heart, with his spirit. There's another story too of a woman who was date raped and then getting pregnant from that. And the shame was so big and so profound that she had to leave her home and did not see her family. And no one asked for her, no one looked for her. And then getting married eventually and feeling the wounds and all the pain from that experience in her marriage, but then coming into the GERI work and realizing how much hatred she had for men, how much anger she had against men, and started her journey there. This is a woman from Africa. But I want to end with a story that I personally witnessed, and it's in the book. And I love this one. In Mexico recently, after the honoring ceremony, that is one of the most precious moments, as Tristan said. And this woman was crying outside. We took a break. She was crying outside, holding a flower that the men had given us. And I went to see what was wrong. I thought that maybe she got triggered or something happened. And she said, "I'm crying because this is the first time in my life that a man has given me a flower and said that I was as beautiful as this flower." The first time in my life I received a flower from a man and to tell me that I am beautiful as this flower. So we cried together. And to me, the stories, even though they're sometimes painful, they also have this magic to bring us together and to warm our hearts, like this last one in Mexico.
Thank you so much. Let's just be with that, with what Tristan has said, what Sylvia has said. And now is the turn of Garrett.
Thank you. Sitting here, I was reflecting back that 7 years ago, I read the first edition of this book, and my life has never been the same.
Thank God, huh?
And after I read it, I was so moved. I wrote to Cynthia and Will, and they were actually here at a program at Omega Institute when I wrote to them. And I just coming to me to read this. In both my first and subsequent readings, I have found myself moved to tears time and time again by both the pain expressed by men and women and friends at the depth and beauty of the healing and forgiveness that arose amongst and between them. Furthermore, as I read, something else was gently stirred in my heart, a sense of hope that I was surprised to feel, a faith that deep healing is possible in this world, that humans have the capacity to live and love together in community, and that something much, much larger is at play and pointing humanity in that direction. This gender reconciliation, this rediscovering of the sacred through the healing of masculine and feminine, is yearned for in the hearts of so many, yearned for and needed. Perhaps I'm overzealous in my enthusiasm, but maybe for the first time, I imagine that something can truly transform the world, that new life may be breathed into spiritual traditions across the globe, that myriad institutions may be deeply transformed, that spiritual life may be kindled anew in the heart of humanity. So it is my prayer that those who read the stories in this book, the dozens of true personal stories that were offered freely by those who have experienced this work, that they can read those stories and feel that same hope.
Thank you, Garrett. Lucille.
So thank you, Garrett, as well. I was touched and inspired by many parts of the book. But in particular, I was inspired by how universal suffering is. However, as a lover of ritual, I loved and was drawn to the stories about how people honored each other across the world. And one example I would like to share that touched me profoundly was the honoring ceremony where the men enacted the process of childbirth to symbolize their role in creating and birthing a gender-healed world. The women were extremely emotional, but they heard the message from the men that they would do what is needed to incubate and birth the change. And in reading that story, I found myself in that honoring ceremony. What was extremely difficult to read were the stories of sexual violence. I felt both the rage and the vulnerability in my bones of those who shared those stories. I know, however, that those stories needed to be told and they needed to be heard. And lastly, I want to share briefly a story in India where a woman was spurred on to share her story after she heard a male participant speak about his obsession with pornography. And this woman was motivated to share how her 20-year marriage dissolved due to her husband's fascination with pornography and prostitution. What was particularly poignant about that story is how she describes being cradled by the male and the female facilitators during her sharing and afterwards, and not physically, but she felt cradled emotionally. This book is a gift of love with parts that made me cry and parts that will make me cry again. But also there were parts that caused my spirit to soar. And such is the business of claiming our liberation. We embrace the pain alongside the joy. And that is a gift. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lucille. Thank you. I just want to comment on one aspect, as you're in silence, about tears. From what Tristan said, Sylvia said, Garrett said, Lucille said. You know, there's a wonderful sage from our part of the world, Mirza Ghalib, 19th century, who says, tears are colorless, thank God. Tears are colorless, thank God. Otherwise, my pillow would betray the secrets of my heart. Then Rumi says, wherever water falls, life flourishes. Wherever there are tears, divine mercy is shown. Therefore, he says, weep like the water wheel, so sweet herbs may grow in the courtyard of your soul. But all the sages also say, please, 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 don't run towards pain and suffering and tears, just don't run away from them. Sister Kristen.
I'm going to play my mother's cake pan to honor the mothers and the grandmothers and the jewel in the heart, and that our bodies are musical instruments and the most mundane things can become musical. Osmany, Osmany,
Thank you so much, allowing those beautiful vibrations to resonate. And now, my friends, inviting some co-authors to read a part of the book that inspired you and read this to the audience. The first one, Esther.
Hello, I'm going to read an excerpt or several excerpts from a young gay man who's currently one of our beloved Australian GERI trainees. So he shares his experience of reconciling his sexuality and his spiritual relationship with God. And I really strongly identify with some of his experiences. He writes, during the Truth Mandala activity in the GERI workshop, the men sat in a semicircle in front of symbolic objects representing the human emotions of anger, shame, fear, sadness, and emptiness. I can recall vividly that the moment I entered the room, my eyes fell on a black sheet lying carelessly scrunched on the floor. At that moment, dread filled me, and I had a strong internal reaction to the object. During William's explanation of the process, I learned that the black sheet symbolized shame. Each man was given the opportunity to stand and engage with one or more of the symbolic objects and speak about their hidden or unexpressed emotions. When I felt ready, I stood and put the black sheet over my head. Standing in front of the other men in this way was extremely confronting. Feelings rose inside as I covered my face with this black, oppressive, ugly object within my own being. I felt shame that somehow I had disappointed God by turning out wrong. Believing I had turned out wrong led me to pursue changing myself in order to be acceptable to God and to other people. The month following the GERI workshop was an internal battle. I was concerned and scared that if I accepted the reality of who I am as a gay man, God would somehow disown me. Transitioning through this process, I realized the spiritual connection I had with the divine was limited. The integration of my sexuality through the process of letting go of my shame actually expanded my connection with God. Only a couple of months after the GERI workshop, I discovered I had encountered a God filled with much more grace than I could possibly comprehend. I experienced incredible bliss in the realization I didn't have to continue to struggle against my own sexuality any longer. God actually accepts me for me. Years later, returning to be involved in GERI as a trainee and doing the 6-month training online was a real sense of coming home for me, coming home into community, coming closer to home spiritually. I'm not there yet. This work helps me find my spirituality because in the GERI community, there's such vulnerability, humanness, and a deep sense of beauty in the work and in the people involved. In all its diversity, multicultural, multilingual, multi-faith, multidimensional, I feel a kind of spiritual flow through it all. In the participants who come to workshops, I see glimpses. I see beauty and the essence of people's vulnerability in their sharing and in their stories, and that is deeply spiritual.
Thank you so much, Esther. Again, a few moments of silence to absorb what you have so beautifully expressed. Julian.
So I'm going to read an excerpt from the early in the book, and it has to do with, it's most of the piece on alchemical nature of gender reconciliation. What was intriguing to me is what actually happens. What is it that actually happens? And this writing reminds me a lot of those 2 a.m. conversations with tea and chocolate. How is the power of this universal love activated and invoked in practice? We adopt the term collective alchemy to describe how it unfolds in the gender healing process. Llewellyn Vaughan-Lee describes the process. The divine light or spark of the soul is directed to areas of blocked awareness or unconsciousness within the individual. As the light of the soul is directed inward, it illuminates and eventually dispels the darkness within. At first, this process brings to conscious awareness what has been repressed and pushed away. This is often quite a painful and humbling process because it typically unmasks a large amount of repugnant shadow material in the consciousness of the individual. Yet deep within this very darkness dwells an innate light, which Jung termed the lumen natura. As the alchemical process continues, this latent inner light is awakened. And over time, it completely transforms the individual into a being of light. Although greatly oversimplified in this description, in essence, the darkness within is transmuted into light and love. In gender reconciliation work, an analogous process takes place on a collective or community level. We gather in a diverse group as men, women and men, for example, and after setting the context and creating a safe space for the work, which is very important, we begin by skillfully exploring areas that are usually avoided or unacknowledged in relation to participants' experiences of gender in their lives. We confront the collective darkness in our society in relation to gender conditioning, sexuality, and the oppression of the feminine that has predominated since antiquity. The process is initially painful, which is why it is usually avoided in our society, or if entered, rarely carried beyond this stage. In gender healing work, we keep going and continue to examine key issues directly and openly. Men and women together, without flinching, yet with compassion as men and women together. In so doing, we bring the light of our personal and social consciousness to dark corridors of human pain that have long been neglected and suppressed. As the process continues, something remarkable eventually begins to happen. There is an awakening of a new light, an unexpected healing energy and grace that arises in some form. This is surprising to many participants because often just when it appears that the group is beginning to tread the most intractable or hopeless territory, seemingly beyond our limited capacity to embrace, there's an infusion of healing presence and grace that suffuses each person with love and opens the door to new pathways together as a group. This ushers in powerful group experiences of healing, reconciliation, and forgiveness that constitute the gold of this collective alchemy. That is the kryptonite that will dissolve the barriers between us.
Thank you, Julian. Then I come to Myra.
Thank you. So I will be reading excerpts from chapter 11. It's the intersectionalities in BIPOC conversation. In 2018, we convened our first North America GERI workshop for people of color, POC, entitled #WeToo, People of Color Healing the Gender Wound. This workshop was held in Seattle and brought together an intimate group of 13 dynamic and inspiring people across different ethnicities, nationalities, and cultures Together, the group delved deeply into stories of challenge, pain, and personal wounding from gender oppression, racism, and white supremacy, courageously opening their hearts and listening intently to one another with compassion and love. The sacred space was both healing and liberating, reigniting the spirit of Ubuntu and mutual harmony that lies at the spiritual heart of humanity. The power of this GERI workshop was the way it gave us space to see ourselves through our own eyes, rather than the eyes of the system that has labeled us. When we came together, we saw ourselves as whole, complete, and enough as we are. There was nothing to place ourselves against to find a positioning. We were simply ourselves, speaking our experiences from a place of deep authenticity. There was no gaze, but our own looking within to find who we are as women and men in community. The truth-telling was powerful. The tears were real. All voices were heard. Every voice was valid. We were real and true to ourselves, our pain and realities, and our communal circumstances. It was profound being in people of color space, reflected one female participant. Seeing brown hands on both sides of me felt good. I felt safer to bring these things up. It's easier to open my heart to men of color knowing you have been targeted by the isms. This was a deep digging to excavate all the namings and markings upon us as a people and community. It was a process of understanding the systems within we have lived and learning how they have marked us, named us, and created a myth around who we are. We were unearthing, understanding, and refusing to accept this outside naming and marking as our story. It was a time of reclaiming and creating our own new stories as individuals and as community. As GERI welcomes in the 30th year anniversary, we are even more committed to creating space and opportunity for all lives to be fully seen and stories to be heard in this healing space with all of its intersections. We have introduced and now we look forward to welcoming more BIPOC, Black, Indigenous people of color, voices learning what we do to know and holding space for all who will come. And so I'll close this way by a participant in the GERI BIPOC session that we had some months ago, when they said, when we entered the space, we did not realize that we were still holding parts of our stories and our breath until we exhaled.
Thank you so much, Myra. And now over to you, mate, my Australian brother, William.
Thank you, Jamal. The reading I'm going to bring paints a scene from 2001. And so I actually invite you to close your eyes for this reading, and I invite you to picture yourself as the words unfold and notice what happens in your own body, even here and now in 2022. It's called Bearing Witness to Gender Injustice, and it's the first 4 paragraphs of chapter 3. Looking out at some 200 upturned faces, now divided into separate women's and men's groups, we ask everyone in the auditorium to turn their chairs so they were no longer facing the podium, but rather were facing the other group across the aisle. There had been a general commotion only moments before as the conference participants had risen to their feet and walked to the side of the aisle where their gender group was gathering. This petition alone ushered in a tangible presence of archetypal energies as the men gathered on one side and the women on the other. The setting was an international conference entitled The Alchemy of Peacebuilding, held in Dubrovnik, Croatia, in June of 2002. The conference brought together activists, politicians, academics, and concerned citizens from several countries to explore new pathways to peace. Included among the participants was an impressive contingent of youth from around the Balkan region and an equally impressive group of young American Black leaders from the Watts neighborhood in Los Angeles. Many of these young people had experienced firsthand the violence of war or civil conflict. It was humbling to hear their stories and inspiring to see their commitment to building a just peace in the world. The energy level in the room intensified, and people were stimulated with both the curiosity and the slight trepidation that always accompanies the beginning of gender reconciliation work. We had opened with a brief introduction to the wider cultural and historical context of gender injustice, and our goal was to give this group an experimental glimpse of the process of gender equity and reconciliation as a component of building peace in the world. As the men and women turned to face one another, a paradoxical combination of heightened tension and deeper intimacy could be felt as the group began a subtle shift toward becoming more of a community and less of an audience. We asked people to pay attention to how it felt to consciously sit within their particular gender group and to notice whatever feelings arose from being placed in these groupings. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, William. And in this section, we have just one more person, but I wanted to tell you we're coming to a close. We'll have some music, and then a very small section after that. And after that, we shall all travel to the promised land, where we shall eat and drink to our heart's content and boogie woogie in gratitude to God. Okay, Michelle.
This is taken from a chapter on transforming patriarchy in religion. And it describes the process of deep listening and how powerful that can be in this context. In the wake of the Me Too campaign and revelations of rampant sexual harassment in our society, Gender Equity and Reconciliation International convened an invitational gathering comprised of 33 key leaders from women's and men's movements across the country. My husband Tim and I were delighted to be invited, and we had no idea what to expect. This subject matter must be one of the most challenging issues of our day, and yet, with wisdom and sensitivity, our facilitators, an international team from the US, India, and South Africa, led us into a safe and beautiful space of sharing and healing. Those attending were a remarkably diverse group in terms of life experience, age, geography, and engagement with this issue. Tim and I were both so surprised at the extent to which both men and women carry wounding, from mother to son, father to daughter, and so on. Not just through physical and/or emotional abuse, but in the unwitting stereotyping passed on in ways that create enormous pressures on young adults. We shared through silent witnessing the pain and heartbreak of individuals' stories, and were moved by the opportunity to listen without judgment, to offer deep, genuine compassion, unconditional love, and respect for one another. Tim and I were struck by the immense value arising from the sharing of both genders of how we have been affected. Personally, my heart is still resonating with joy and a growing sense of hope that gender equity might actually become a reality during our daughters' lives. We laughed together, we cried, and we bonded around our individual experiences of deep wounding and personal shame, sharing the beginnings of our journey towards reconciliation between our genders. To my mind, the strength of reconciliation that took place could not have happened without the skillful guidance of our leaders, down into the deepest pits of our pain, holding attentively each other's grief and distress, through to sincere affirmation and shared appreciation for one another. We recognize that we cannot fix anyone else's pain, but we witnessed how we can each be a part of another's healing. I was reminded of workshops I've led with Kenyans, Ugandans, Rwandans, and South African brothers and sisters designed to reconcile racial differences and tensions. But this GERI process, which I believe can be adapted to address racially based injustices, gave me new insight and appreciation for what was missing. This was something unique that goes far beyond an intellectual conviction of the need for change, to a wholehearted, emotional, and instinctive commitment to collaborate with one another in healing together, driven by a powerful and unified rejection of gender injustice. Our experience of this approach to gender reconciliation has left us with an overwhelming conviction that now is the time to fully engage and be a part of ensuring this movement continues to act as a catalyst throughout this country and beyond, gathering momentum and scaling up towards deep and sustained change for our grandchildren. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michelle. So the last section, Haren, we are so excited you are here. We'd like you to speak briefly about the South Korean book club you have started and the translations you're doing of each chapter in the first GERI book, Divine Duality, into the Korean language, and the work you and Louis have done to get Divine Duality published in the Korean language.
Thank you, Jamal. Yeah, actually, I wrote down what I wanted to say. I will read it, please understand. I work as a psychologist and nonviolent communication trainer. I was very impressed after being introduced to GERI by chance in 2018. I thought this might be the key I was looking for wandering around. I signed up for Amazon right away and bought this book. Yeah, after reading this book, I was really touched and cried a lot. And I invited 5 women and 5 men to read this book together. I met them one by one and talked about the experience I was introduced to, and 10 people, including 4 women's studies professors, psychologists, therapists, and teachers, got together to start the first book club. Of course, I'm not a professional translator, but a few people helped me translate it together, and we met 8 times for 3 hours. Read and talk. It wasn't a workshop, but a lot of true stories were in the book, so we quickly had a deep conversation. And we felt very safe because the book talks about the truth, the power of love we already have. We share our own story and we cried quietly together at the story of the people in the book. We connected. I emailed William and Cynthia and introduced myself, and we met and talked on Skype instead of Zoom. Later, I attended in-person workshop in Pokhara, Nepal, and New York, USA. And my colleague Louis and I translate this book together, but the opportunity to publish didn't come easily in Korea. You know, the gender conflict in Korea is getting worse. I've been angry with some people not to take over feminism with the word reconciliation. Many people in Korea are very sensitive to the word forgiveness and reconciliation. We spend our time waiting for the right time rather than giving up. We introduced GERI to people whenever we had time. Since then, we have opened a second and third book club and introduced GERI to the LGBTIQA+ community and university in Korea. While doing the book club, I met 3 colleagues who wanted to devote more to GERI, and I am still with them. We made a homepage and did Facebook. You know, one day last fall at the cafe, I explained about the GERI work to a politician for about 30 minutes, but suddenly an unknown woman at the next table came up to me and gave me the publisher's business card and said she wanted to make the book. Wow. So yeah, I was very surprised, and I thought this was the destiny that the universe made. Yeah, finally, at the end of this month, the Korean version of Divine Duality will be released in Korea. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. The Korean title of this book is The Beauty of Gender Reconciliation Between Women and Men. Now, I'm very happy, and I will continue to be with GERI, with a vision, and with you guys. And I love this community. And thank you.
Thank you. Wow. Harid, we are so grateful for your dedication, devotion, vision, creativity, and incredible energy. Mark Green, can you say something about your beautiful contribution to the book?
I think that what's coming to me as I think about all the stories in the book and about the conversations that I hear in this room is that one of the great deceptions for white cis men like ourselves is that we are somehow unable to compare our stories to people whose stories may be more challenging, more violent, more deeply difficult to hear. And part of that is, I think, a tendency on our own part to believe that our own experience is somehow emptier or more alone, and that we can never step across the isolation of our own privilege and our shame about that privilege to really hear other people's stories. And the joy I have in the book and in the community here is that I was finally able to get rid of that defensive shame position, which actually protected me from knowing or understanding. And so I write about that in my chapter, but I also am so grateful to be able to feel like I am indeed a part of this conversation, and I have a place here that is of equal value to everyone else. So that's my response.
Thank you, thank you, thank you so much. Thank you. So my dear friends, now it's time for celebration. And what are we celebrating? We are celebrating this book that will create the incredible momentum that is divinely inspired, supremely accelerated, and lovingly guided by God to serve the common good. Let's give it a wonderful hand.
This is an amazing occasion here as we're blessing this book that's coming out. Can you imagine a world in which suffering and pain and hurt caused by patriarchy no longer exists? Can you imagine a world in which women, men, and LGBTQ+ love each other and support each other to be their fullest selves? Can you imagine a world in which all people feel free to dance and celebrate their vitality, surrounded by loving community? This book is about the magical work of gender reconciliation around the world. As we send this book out to the universe, may it touch people's hearts in special and unknown ways.